In the last episode, we listened to Nicole explain how Tony was traveling more and more for work, all while pulling further away from her and their son. And when things finally came to a head, it set her on a mission to find out the real truth. And what she discovered on her son's iPad was that her husband was having an affair with a woman from another country. Now she was on a mission and blazing full force ahead with divorce. But she was also still uncovering more and more about what Tony had been up to with his new mistress.
Around that same time, it was like he got too big for his britches. He always wanted to be this rich man. It's hysterical to me that I feel like she wanted him because of the money. And I felt like it was kind of a scam because, she was 26 and he's in his 40s. Like, I felt like they were both scamming each other. I just think it's hysterical.
Stick with us because we're going to tie up this story and then break down how to identify if you're experiencing boiling frog syndrome, and most importantly, how to get out before it takes something like what happened to Nicole before pulling the plug on a toxic relationship. Welcome to Ex-Wives Undercover.
Liars, cheaters, and love cons.
I'm Amber.
And I'm Athena.
First, we told our story, and now we're sharing all of your craziest and most heart-wrenching stories of love gone wrong. Sometimes we laugh,
And sometimes we cry.
but more importantly,
We stand together. All right, girl. You ready to do this?
Let's do it.
The views, information, or opinions expressed on our show by our guests are solely the views of those individuals involved and by no means represent absolute facts. Opinions expressed by the host and guests may change at any time. Our podcast and YouTube show may at times cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to suicide, abuse, violence. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
We're going to back up just a tiny bit from where we left off in the last episode because the next day after Nicole's big discovery on the iPad, she called her best friend who worked for Tony to get her thoughts on the information she discovered about her husband.
I texted her right away and we met for lunch. It wasn't that we had stopped being friends because we had still been friends. We just weren't as close because I think she wanted to protect herself and he was doing everything he could to try to keep us from communicating in a free manner. We just had lunch and talked about it and she's like, well, yeah. She was very forthcoming after. She's like, I knew that you'd figure it out. I've had plenty of people question me saying, well, why, if she knew, why didn't she tell you? She only knew for 3 or 4 weeks before I found out. It wasn't like she had this big, long, diary of evidence. And, if you've ever been in like a situation where that your friend's spouse is cheating on them, that can go one of two ways. Either they're going to believe you or they're going to not believe you, and then you get cut out completely. And it's just a very risky thing to do. You just don't know how that's going to go. So I don't blame her at all for holding, and it was her job.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Like, your livelihood is attached to that. So making it even more complicated.
So it was a very complicated thing, very complex with all of us kind of having some knowledge of it, but not really. And I don't think he went out of his way to be like, yeah, this is, I'm banging this lady. He just told her to book a flight for this girl that was going to be a translator for him, a Ukrainian translator in Brazil.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Totally plausible. Like,
wow. I didn't hear that story. That was a good one. Wow.
Oh yeah. Because, he wanted to have her come to this Brazil trip.
And write it off too, I'm sure.
Write it off. Right, correct. Because on top of everything else, we got corrupt business practices on top of it. So,
Speaking of that, let's go into, so is this lunch when you were informed about him charging on the business credit card in the upwards of $50,000 to $70,000 a month?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. First thought, because I'm married to him, am I liable for this, or like any kind of concerns there?
I wasn't necessarily concerned because he had gone, and I guess luckily for me, he had gone to such great lengths to separate everything and have me nowhere on any of the business stuff. I wouldn't have been liable for it anyway. They had been awarded an Army contract. And at that point in time, that's when he got this, what do they call that? It was like the platinum medal American Express card at like the super high,
Yep.
no limit.
Amex. Yep.
The no limit, whatever. And that's when he started spending like through the fucking roof, just in general, on everything. Around that same time, it was like he got too big for his britches. He always wanted to be this rich man. that he wasn't. And that's what is so hysterical to me, because I feel like he was trying to portray this, I'm this businessman and I'll just wine and dine, and here's this $30,000 this, and here's this $2,500 Christian Milan thing, and here's a purse, and here's this, and here's a $20,000 diamond ring from Tiffany's, and portray this wealth, if you will, when he didn't have any. It's hysterical to me that I feel like she wanted him because of the money, because he portrayed this. And I felt like it was kind of a scam because, she was 26 and he's in his 40s. And, I'm sorry, age gap, people come at me, I don't care. But like, that's just weird. That is that 90-day fiancé passport bro thing where they go over and shop for a wife and then they buy their love. Like, I felt like they were both scamming each other. I just think it's hysterical.
While Nicole tried her best to keep her cool before Tony came home, he called to say he had to extend his trip to accommodate a meeting. She knew better, though, and could see everything he was doing from his new mistress's Instagram account.
He's telling me that he got delayed because some other person came and he had additional meetings and all this other stuff. Now, he doesn't know that I know about her Instagram. And she's posting photos, not of him, but it doesn't, like, that was beside the point. Because where is he? You know what I mean? Like, at that point, I already knew it was her. I'm watching and they're posting shit. And not only was it was her mother, and her grandmother. All of them in a big suite in this huge hotel somewhere in Paris for Paris Fashion Week, because that was important.
Were you at this point just on fire mad or devastatingly hurt? Somewhere in between?
Mix of both, probably. Disbelief, I think, was the main. I was just like, what? I was so, I think I said, what the fuck? Like at least 20 times an hour, like just like, what the fuck? Like I was so confused by the behaviors, by the spending, by, I'm just like sitting there going, oh my God, are you having some sort of midlife meltdown crisis here? What the fuck is going on? Just so you know, I didn't even know he was wiring her money weekly at that point. So I hadn't even seen that part. It was just like, it was coming in drips and drabs. So it'd be like, I'd find something out that I thought was like, this is insane that this is even happening. And then by the time I got to the point where I was like, okay, then another insane thing would happen. And I'm just like, so flummoxed by the, I was just like, who are you? What the fuck is this?
At this point, did you tell anybody else about your plans to divorce him? So was it just
everybody,
you and your friend, or you were just like put everyone on blast, like, hey?
It was everybody. Everybody was, everybody got some of it because, I think, and maybe this happened with you, I don't know. I'm a hyper-focused kind of person. And when something's going on, I just don't talk about anything else but this one thing. And it became a bit obsessive. Actually lost some friends over it because, these unmarried, one of them married but no children, people were having comments about whether I should or shouldn't get over it. Or, I was posting memes on Facebook. I can look back at it now and go, oh, that was a cry for attention. Because it was. Because I was feeling very deflated and very, cast aside, abandoned, the whole thing. It opened up all of these childhood wounds and all of those things that either I hadn't processed fully or whatever. They were sitting there talking shit about, oh, well, she's posting these memes, blah, 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 and like judging me. for how I was reacting to it. And my thing is, and I'll take a line from Grey's Anatomy, you don't get to decide how I put myself back together. Nobody gets a say in how I choose to heal myself. I am tethered to him to perpetuity. So I had to be smart about how I interacted with him, but that had to come out somewhere else. It had to go, those feelings had to go somewhere.
With Tony finally back in town, it was time to lay the smackdown and tell him she wanted a divorce.
I found out it was the early morning hours of September 18th. By September 27th, I had filed the paperwork, paid the attorney, and it had been filed. He came in, he flew in, and I think I had mentioned this, last week. I had went to a friend's house, or to our son's best friend's house, and I asked his parents, I said, hey, can he stay with y'all? Because I don't know what's going to happen. But I don't want him here for whatever discussion's going to occur. I said, well, do you want to meet, at a restaurant or whatever? And he said, yeah, that sounds good. I'll meet you at the mall. And I said, okay, no problem. I said, do you want me to bring you anything from the house? And he said, well, why would I need something from the house? And I said, oh, well, just asking. But I think at that point he probably knew.
He's probably shitting himself. Like, how does she know? What? He probably would never have thought about the iPad.
Probably not, first of all. But the thing is that he turned it around as soon as, well, I wasn't really trying to hide it very much. And I was like, okay, that's why it was in the hidden folder. All right. To be honest with you, I did not want the type of divorce that my parents had. I didn't want it to be contentious. I didn't want it to be that way. So I tried very, very difficult, very hard on me emotionally. I'm going to take the hit emotionally to protect my child from having that same experience. I want us to just kind of, be able to be cordial and be able to be in the same room with one another and not have, this contentiousness. Because again, I think even at that point, I looked at it as a gift, as I got my out. Because I was done, and I had been done.
Now, you all know from the last episode that it wasn't a smooth transition for long, because as soon as Tony took a FaceTime call with his Ukrainian mistress in their family home, it was game on. So as he's packing his shit to get out of your house, what went down? You tigered on him. Good girl.
So with the background of that is that in the hidden folder, okay, there are a ton of nude photos of this woman. So I knew all her business, all of it in the glory of whatever wasn't there. She was rather small in the chest area. And I said, just so you know, your boobs are bigger than hers.
And any response?
He said, I mean, good one. What's funny is all these photos that he was posing with her, you could tell he was, because he's shorter than her. And he would be standing puffing his chest out and really trying to suck in because he was still a little overweight at the time. Just really, and it was just so funny.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably going to be people saying you shouldn't have hit below the belt, but sometimes it's all, you know what? If you feel it, just...
it was really the only thing I ever fucking said to him.
Right.
Yeah. Otherwise, I did tell him he was stupid. I said, you're a moron if you believe that this is love and that she's in love with you for you. I said, you're sending her money weekly. And his response to that was, well, you pay for it somehow.
Tony left after this incident and went to live in a hotel and then boarded a plane to the Ukraine. Yep. At this point, her Instagram is still opened, and you're still watching a play-by-play of what's going down. But this is also when you're learning about everything he's buying her and this and that. Yep. Tell us about finding out about the Tiffany engagement ring.
Well,
because at this point, she's open to the public, and obviously he must have told her like, oh, my wife, my soon to be ex-wife knows about your Instagram. Maybe you should shut it down,
Well,
close it up.
so his thing was, well, you said you weren't going to look. And I said, you believed me? That was stupid. Like, what woman would say, oh, yeah, of course I'm not going to look. Please, are you fucking daft? And even if I wasn't looking, all of my friends had already like downloaded who the fuck she was and was watching it like a hawk anyway. I didn't even have to fucking look at it. The Tiffany engagement ring he bought, he sold one of his firearms to get it, paid some cash, and then put the rest on a credit card and billed it to the company.
It's just so hurtful. It's spiteful. Like, out of respect, like, she should be like, she's a woman. She knows that us women, we're snoopy. You could say you're not going to look, but we all know that we do. And so why doesn't she shut that down and make it private temporarily while this all gets ironed out?
Just the whole thing was the most ludicrous shit I've ever seen. And, her posting these things about, oh, he's the love of my life. Yeah, while he's wiring you $500 a week. The fuck?
So did she not work?
No. I don't think the girl's ever been employed a day in her life, which, of course, he denied, but whatever. She's an Instagram model, don't you know? So she also had a Facebook at the time, okay? And, like, we FBI'd the shit out of it. We found every website she'd ever visited, pretty much. We found on her Facebook 2 other engagement rings. So he was fiancé number 3. He's like, oh, that she was engaged once, but that's the same ring. It's not 2 different. I said, bitch, I know the difference between a princess cut and a round cut. And those are 2 different rings. She was lying and he was lying. And again, it's like both of them just fucking lying to each other. So it's built on trust, isn't it? Their whole relationship.
I'm surprised it lasted as long as it has so far, but
I think it's only because they have 2 kids and she's stuck.
Yeah, probably. Here's where our listeners, there's going to be some people that be like, why are you going after her? Why are you going so hard on her when he's the one that did this? What do you say to that? Like, she's a victim just as much as you were a victim to his tactics, I guess?
Sure. And I can allow for a certain amount of that. And I did in the beginning allow a lot of grace for that, because I was very much aware that he was doing almost the identical thing to her that he did with me. To that end, I never contacted her. I never reached out to her. I never called her names. I never said shit to her. My anger and everything had always been pointed at him. He was 100% at fault for all of it. Now, the part that I get irritated with her about is that you knew he had a kid and you allowed him to not see him for 3 fucking years. And you didn't push him to contact him in a regular way. So that, as a woman, as a mother, and now you're a mother, I hope you realize that if he does this to you, you have 2 kids. Hope he doesn't do it to you. Like, I just thought it was a shitty thing to do.
Yeah, and we'll get to that part too, because you're coming from a place of hurt for your child.
Yes.
Your mama bear's coming out, and that's natural.
Yeah. I have no doubt that he's doing the same shit to her, just in a different way, because her insecurities are different. So he's going to find a different way to do the same type of abusive tactics that he did with me. And actually, I feel bad for her, because with her not with English as her second language, do you know how easy it would be for somebody like him to just be like, oh, you didn't understand what I said? Like, yeah. And I can hear it in his voice. I can hear, like, just oh God, it makes me sick for her. Like, that just sucks for her. It does.
Yeah.
And it must be an incredibly lonely feeling to be here in the United States. You don't have your mom, you don't have your grandma, you have no support system, but what he's provided. That is like abuser 101.
And where are they now? So obviously people could figure out that he moved her here. They did get married and they have children and they're still together.
Yeah.
For as long as you know. Now tell us, did you cease all communication with him other than your son? But it sounds like let's revisit how he basically didn't see his son for 3 years.
So, we blamed it on COVID, first of all. I got stuck over there because of COVID, but I later found out it was because she was pregnant.
How did your son react to the whole divorce? And he obviously never met her until recently, and we can go into that in a second, but how did he deal with the divorce?
I think he dealt with it probably better than I did. He's not a kid of many words. And so, he never really talked to me too much about how it affected him. And actually, I'm just now starting to get more of that from him. The abuse to me about like the things that he did and said to me with the emotional and mental abuse, it wasn't just me. He did it to our son too. When my son would say something, he'd be like, why don't you just act like a normal human being? Like, what kind of dad says that to their child and wants a positive result from that? So he always made him feel outcast, made him feel ashamed, made him feel stupid, put him down all the time, questioned him how he, oh, your hair's a mess. You need to get your hair cut. Oh, it was just, and that's continued pretty much. He wouldn't let him talk when we were in car rides. He would try to add something in and he'd say, oh, this is an adult conversation. You don't need to participate because, you don't make sense. He was 6. Of course he doesn't fucking make sense. Like,
Right.
It was just these unrealistic expectations of what a kid his age should be doing. And it just was always wildly just out of touch with his actual age. For a long time, he wouldn't talk to me even because he felt this weird, because that was constantly, you don't talk, you don't talk, you don't talk. And so he didn't develop a lot of those interpersonal skills.
I mean, I can imagine, obviously, from the get-go, it was you two and Tony over here.
Yeah.
And the natural bond is going to be with you, and you've been kind of at it solo, even though you're married for so long.
Yeah.
Was there any discussion on visitation and how that would work out? Because how do you all of a sudden, like, I understand COVID, but like, what happened to after COVID?
So
he didn't implement his parental rights to see his son?
Never has. In any sort of regular way to this day, still doesn't have any sort of regular schedule with him. It's always just willy-nilly whenever he feels like it, which, is part of the MO, isn't it? Like to keep you on your toes and keep you guessing. And, oh, well, if I'm constantly seeking validation and you're constantly yes, no, that keeps you in a state of off balance. And that's what he's doing to him.
Now it's time to unpack some learning moments and final thoughts about Nicole's story with Tony. I mean, I can imagine when you go through something like this, it really is a blow all around. What would you tell other women it's almost like you got replaced and it's so blatantly obvious, like it's like they're flaunting it. So not only did he take this strong woman that's what he liked about you in the very beginning, then he crushes your soul for 15 plus years, and does something like that that's so disrespectful and flaunts it in your face. How do you process that and not feel defeated and hurt and like you're insecure? And how do you not let that get to you?
I needed at least, and I dated a few people in between here and there, but was dating them for the wrong reasons, and, allowed myself to get too connected to a couple of them. And, I decided after, this most recent one, I was like, you know what, I need to stop trying to make this square peg fit in a round hole. I'm not there yet. And through lots and lots of therapy, still in therapy, you find techniques to deal with the triggers, because you're going to be triggered and you don't even know what the hell the trigger is going to be. There is a period, I think, when you're in a relationship with somebody who's toxic, not just narcissistic, but toxic, they keep you in this fight or flight response with all of the tragedies, all of the things, always a crisis. It's a crisis. It's a crisis. It's a crisis. And so that becomes a problem because your body is used to living in this heightened state of anxiety, right? And you don't even realize that you're in this heightened state of anxiety until it's no longer there. And then it feels like something's missing because you felt like that for so damn long that it doesn't feel normal to feel normal, if you will. It's definitely a process and it isn't easy, but I think the best advice I can give you is don't date anybody else until you are 100% completely sure you are not going to bleed on somebody who didn't cut you. Heal yourself, be fine with you first. Like I have refound who I am and who I want to be, and I know now what I will or won't accept.
One of the themes that you see running throughout is the boiling frog syndrome.
Yeah.
And escalating to a point where like you don't even know that you're being boiled alive, essentially. Nope. So
this is warm. This is cozy.
Yeah. And
it's like a bubble.
Right?
Your body just adjusts to that level of stress and cortisol and all that other stuff that heightens your things for heart disease, for liver disease, for all these other things that just like it's just terrible for your body.
Is there, I know it's probably hard to pinpoint, but is there any advice you could give for someone who might be going through the boiling frog syndrome and how to recognize that that's happening before 20 years goes by? How do you know you're being boiled?
The best advice, wait to get married. Do not marry somebody that isn't fully formed when you're not fully formed. I think the most transformative years are your 20s. Spend your 20s, get all the, don't try to tie yourself down to some person or, with the social constructs, feeling like you're pressured to be married to somebody. And luckily, I think between 2004, when all of this happened, and now, luckily, we seem to have somewhat gone away from the pressure for younger women to get married. Like a lot of that has been alleviated. Those were things that were pressures when I was that age. I don't know that there was any one defining moment. It was death by 1,000 tiny cuts.
Yeah. We think Nicole is onto something when she talks about not rushing into a relationship too fast. There was actually a really great interview recently on the podcast, Let's Be Honest with Kristen Cavallari. She interviewed Dr. Sherry Campbell, author of Adult Survivors of Toxic Family Members, and this is what she had to say on the topic.
The first 18 months of being in love, you cannot tell the difference between a brain high on cocaine, okay, or newly in love.
Yeah, which is scary.
In those 18 months, my suggestion is, because what is love bombing? This is another very cliche thing. But my boyfriend bombed me in the beginning, and he's not a narcissist.
Okay. What's the difference?
Okay, so if they want to go on vacation with you first week and they're talking engagement, we'll probably have a problem.
Yeah.
You're the one. I can feel it, blah, blah, blah.
God, I know it.
But really, do their actions line up? Let's say they're saying all the perfect things. Okay, that's great. They are word magicians if they are a narcissist.
Yes.
Do they do what they say?
Okay. Yeah.
And if they're not, you have to have the self-control with your high on cocaine brain to say this is already inconsistent. So give yourself 18 months.
I know. That's how long it takes to really get to know someone.
Once that wears off, you start to see the real person.
Yep.
And you start to be more of your real person.
God, I've said 6 months, really 18 months, you think?
To really know.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
If they're really overtly narcissistic, Kristen, you're going to know.
You're going to know.
6 months.
Wow, that is incredible information and very useful to keep in mind if you're out there in the dating world right now. Now let's jump back to the boiling frog topic, shall we? Well, first of all, what is it? Boiling frog syndrome is the premise that if a frog is put suddenly into boiling water, it will jump out. But if the frog is put into tepid water, which is then brought to a boil slowly, it will not perceive the danger and actually be cooked to death. This metaphor is often used to describe toxic relationships and explain why people don't just leave. Before we wrap up this episode, let's go over 5 awareness tools to avoid boiling frog syndrome. Number 1, break out of your routine. Periodically, take a step back from your day-to-day routine to reflect on your life. The goal is to let your subconscious mind make relationships between distant areas of your brain. At some point, you get to recognize hidden patterns that govern your life. Number 2, keep a personal journal. One thing that we suggest often is an app called Perspective. By keeping a journal, you can refresh in your mind what happens to you over a longer period of time, and then you can get a clearer picture of your overall personal life. Number 3, get an external point of view. One technique that works well in conjunction with the personal journal is to speak about your problems to a supportive friend or family member. Number 4, read books. And number 5, use a risk registry. Once you identify a risk and some potential solutions to it, you can store it in your, quote, risk registry and review it periodically. Here are some final thoughts from Nicole.
I think for anybody who's been in a relationship like that, there is a level of shame that you feel in talking about those things. So, even now, my mother, who I told pretty much everything to, because I sent her the thing that I had sent you guys, and she goes, I just didn't realize it was that bad, because I kept a lot of it back because I already knew.
Yeah.
I knew it was wrong. I knew it was.
And that's another good point. Like, if you're
withholding,
withholding,
lying for your partner, trying to make them seem better than what they are, it's problematic. Nobody goes into a marriage expecting that it's going to end. Nobody goes in saying, you know what, I'll give this 5 to 10 years and then we'll call it quits. Everybody is going in saying it's forever. It's till death do us part. So there is a grieving that happens at the loss of what you thought that person was and what you thought your relationship was. You're grieving a loss, and in some ways it's worse than a death, because there that person is smiling in your face with new home slice, and it's like it's still there, just in your face.
Makes it even harder. Yeah.
It does. And to me at this point, like, I don't, whatever, good luck. Like I said, I think, honestly, I think he is abusing her, and I think he is, just in different ways, and ways that she might not recognize.
Can you find any silver lining from having gone through this experience? Because you can't wish it away. It happened, and so it's something you have to kind of,
So the silver lining for me is that I think I've come out on the other side a better person, a better human, a better mother to my child. I think my son is healthier and happier and more well-adjusted than he was with his father living in this house. He and I are thriving without him. If you feel embarrassed, if you feel shamed, talk to somebody who's not involved. Not your parents, not your friend, not your family, an uninterested third party, to get their opinion on it. Somebody that you can trust, that their opinion isn't going to be colored by what they think of your spouse as a person.
Yeah. What would you offer people as far as resources, besides listening to stories on XYZ Undercover and other pods of similar stories? What was it that helped you? Was it a book? I know we talked about Psychopath Free.
Yes.
Was there other resources that were just like, they really moved the needle on your healing process? And obviously you're still healing, and that will take a little while.
This type of abuse changes your fucking brain. It changes the way you think. It changes the way you react. It changes the way everything is processed in your brain. It changes your brain chemistry. And I don't think people realize that that's the devastating thing. It makes you, they say that somebody undergoing narcissistic abuse will display autistic traits, will display ADHD traits, even if before they weren't. because that's just what it does to your brain. I found there was a couple of people that I followed on TikTok. Mental Healness is one of them. A gentleman who's a diagnosed narcissist. He's talking about it from his perspective as a narcissist. And while I'm dubious as to the motive behind his, I take it for what it is. It was interesting to me to tap into kind of confirm the things that I thought about mine and how he thought about things. To have that confirmed by somebody who's a diagnosed narcissist helped me process, okay, I've identified what that was. I can see what happened, and it helped me. These people are incredibly predictable. Like, it's almost like they're all off the same playbook. It is once you see it, you cannot unsee it. I want to make sure that other women who are in the point where maybe they could leave or are thinking about leaving, they don't feel alone, because it feels incredibly lonely to go through these things. And the more people that talk about it and bring it into the light and not have a shameful outlook of it, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something, the strongest women I know have been manipulated into an abusive relationship. It is not something you can see coming by design. I feel like he stole my 20s and 30s. There's nothing I can do about that. The best revenge for me is to put myself together and move forward in a positive manner without him, and show him that, and not even for him, for me. I don't give a fuck what he thinks about me. I don't care what he thinks about me. I don't care what he thinks about my parenting. I don't care. But that's the point I had to work to get to. One of the biggest things for me is I don't want to know what it takes to treat somebody that way, because I don't want to be that person. Because what kind of depraved, nasty-minded individual goes out of their way to hurt and maim and try to break down somebody just because they're not worshiping you? I don't even know the rationale. And frankly, I don't even care to know the rationale as to why people do the crazy shit they do.
I know. I mean, and that's another can of worms, is broken people hurt people. It is true. Like, obviously somewhere along the line, he was a broken person and he did not fix himself. So then the cycle continues.
Yep.
And so, but it's not up to us to fix someone. So the more quicker you can identify a broken person, I don't know, maybe I'm not even saying this in a nice way, but like,
I mean, you
have the right to say, until you fix yourself, I'm not participating, leave it at that.
I think, the mainstreamness of therapy from 2020 has it's kind of a double-edged sword, because now some of these people are picking up, therapy language and are using it to make them seem like they've healed themselves. And really, it's just all a mask. And that's terrifying.
Yeah, knowledge is power. When they say that, that is true. So we'll just keep spreading the word. And we cannot thank you enough for coming on the show. What a wild ride. And I'm so sorry that you went through all that. But I can tell that you're almost there. You're almost on the other side. You're pretty close. I think you're still, processing, and there's some hurt, but man, you're a survivor.
The hurt has been like I said, the hurt that I feel is for how he treats my son and how I see, him treating him.
It's crazy. I mean, our listeners don't even probably realize, like, this is usually the first time you're telling it from start to finish. It is like a therapy session. Like, you're kind of opening these wounds that you thought were a little bit closed up. So it is kind of crazy. Like, when you speak it and verbalize it, then all of a sudden you're unpacking all these emotions because you're seeing it on a timeline that we're going through. And hopefully it's cathartic at some point, and you feel like, oh man, it feels like a relief just to get it off your chest too. Once you do it.
It does. I think that those first TikTok series were so therapeutic for me, and it moved me so far down the needle just to be able to get it out and say it in a way that was succinct, in a message that even if it only reached one person, I didn't care. I just wanted to help the next me. As a woman, is important for us to support other women so that they don't feel, or that they understand that they're not alone.
How do you not allow yourself to get jaded and pessimistic about the world, about relationships, about everything? Because it can easily go that way, I think, once you've gone through something so horrific.
I think, there is a bit of that, I think, in any part, and it's a self-preservation technique. What do we got? We got fight, flight, or freeze, right? So some of it is freeze. I don't want anybody to talk to me. I don't want anybody to touch me. I don't want anybody to do anything to me. And sometimes you can get stuck in that. And actually, the book Psychopath 3 talks about how it's easy to kind of go overboard on spotting narcissists everywhere. It's almost like, I see dead people. They're everywhere,
Yeah. I mean, I think these days we all do. We're like, that person's a narcissist and that person's a sociopath and that person's a psychopath.
So,
they're all just shitty people, whether they're diagnosed or not.
Right. And I think, it's easier to write people off. And I'll say this. If you need to do it, fucking do it to protect yourself. And if that's what you can do to heal and get past it, I don't necessarily know that it's a bad thing to do that for self-protection. Now, what you need to do while you're self-protecting is self-reflect on why you're protecting yourself and figure out and get to the root of all of that so that you can get past it. And then when you get out, kind of turtle out a little bit, we'll head out. Like,
yeah.
No.
Well, we will.
Not ready.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's no time for it, but we will definitely loop back with you to do an update episode to see where you're at. Cause it'll be some time, and then we'll see how your healing is going. What new things are going on in your life. And cause we want to show the progress of going through it.
Well, thank you so much for having me on and letting me tell my story and share it with other people. I hope others find it helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And we loved having you on.
And once again, if you like what you're hearing, please leave us a 5-star review and make sure to join our private Facebook group for even more juicy info. You can also find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And of course, you can always visit our site at www.xwivesundercover.com.